Hi everyone, I'm John from Sophos and welcome to this short video where I'm going to showcase one of the key features of the Sophos Security ecosphere, namely Synchronized Security. So if you're not familiar with the concept of synchronized security, it's essentially the ability for what would have been multiple different disparate security solutions to work together as a system. In this case, what I'm going to do is show you the endpoint and the firewall sharing security information and responding together as a coordinated system. This relies on the Sophos security heartbeat, which is basically indicating the health of an endpoint to the rest of the system. And as you can see in this diagram, I have three connected endpoints, which are all initially demonstrating a green security heartbeat, basically indicating that they are healthy. However, if one of those devices becomes compromised, that security heartbeat is going to change to a red status. And that's telling the rest of the system that this device specifically has some kind of issue with it. Now, the XG firewall can respond to that by changing its security stance. So what it's going to do in the first instance is isolate that device and prevent it from connecting to the internet. And this is incredibly powerful in its own right, because what we're doing here is preventing any further manipulation by cyber criminals if their attack is coming from the outside world. Because if you cut the device off from the internet, it's no longer going to receive any further command and control communications. And also it's not able to exfiltrate data out of the organization to the outside world. Of course, it's well documented that a common feature of modern ransomware in particular is its ability to spread laterally through the organization. So in other words, as soon as one device becomes compromised, it will then try and spread that infection around to other devices in the network. And that traffic, of course, is going nowhere near the firewall. So the XG firewall on its own cannot respond to that situation. But this is where we can use the power of Sophos Central. So Sophos Central is going to immediately tell all the other devices in the network that that device that is compromised has some kind of issue, and that other devices shouldn't accept any communications from that compromised machine. And what this is doing is preventing that malware from spreading and propagating around the rest of the network. Okay, so that all sounds very good in theory, but let's have a look at how this would appear from both an end user's perspective and also the administrator. So what we've got here is the XG management console, and you can see the security heartbeats being received up in the top corner. So you can see I have two green heartbeats on my network, but it would also show where I have a device that has a red heartbeat, that is missing a heartbeat, maybe because the endpoint is no longer communicating or that the endpoint is not working properly, and also an amber heartbeat, which is indicating the device is potentially in the process of being compromised. So there may be an unwanted application there, for example. So let's look at one of those Sophos protected endpoints, and you can see by navigating down to the bottom shield that this device is currently generating a green security heartbeat because of the green tick. Typical workflow of a user is they will arrive at work in the morning and they will open up their emails, and the first thing that we find is a newsletter from a popular theme park here, for example. And what I'm really doing here is just illustrating that at the moment this device has internet access, so we can click through the links on that email and we can access the internet. The next email down is an invitation to a file share on the internal network. So this could be either the other side of the firewall or it could be in the same network segment. It doesn't really matter. And as you can see, by clicking through on those links, I'm able to access the resources that are located on that device. And then a little bit further down again, I have an RDP connection here available. So this is for an overhead monitor, maybe in a call center or something similar. And I can click through and access that RDP link, and we can access the device in question. So again, as you would expect, we have access to all the things that we should because we know the device is in a green security status, so everything is fine. However, if we go back to the emails, the last email on that list is apparently from the HMRC. And I suspect that some of you may be able to recognize already that this is actually a phishing attack and there is no tax refund. However, our user is going to fall for the trick and they're going to activate all of the active content in this device. And what they're actually doing is activating ransomware on this device. But you can see InterceptX on the endpoint is detecting that immediately and shutting down that that ransomware. You'll also see in the background that the security heartbeat status is changing to red. And if we go back to the firewall console, we can see that that is being received by the XG firewall management console. And if we click through on that red heartbeat, the device is actually communicating with the XG firewall and giving useful information. So not just the IP address, but also the host name of the machine and the currently active user on that device. And all of these tools are incredibly useful when it comes to actually locating where that user is. Particularly in a large organization, it's a lot easier to find June in accounts, for example, as opposed to trying to track down an IP address. However, let's go back to our compromised machine and let's see what effects have taken place. So the device is now in a state of a red heartbeat, and that means the XG firewall is now going to block its internet access. You can see that I can no longer access the internet because the XG firewall is intervening. You can see that also the server that we had access to earlier is now being told not to receive communications from this device, and I'm no longer able to access the resources on that machine either. And the same is also true of the RDP connection. So this device is really isolated at the moment. It means the cyber criminals can't communicate with it, it means it can't exfiltrate data, and it means that any compromise cannot spread and propagate around the rest of the network. Sophos Central is now busy in the background cleaning up this device and removing any traces of the infection. And you can see when that's complete because the heartbeat will go back to a green status. Now that we know the device is healthy again, then we can actually restore access to this machine. So if we want to go back to the internet, for example, now we know the device is healthy, we're able to do that. If we want to access that internal file server, then again we can do that, and the same is also true of that RDP link as well. But do please remember that all the time where this device was potentially compromised, we pinned down all of that access. It's worth mentioning that there's no fancy editing in this video and everything you've seen is happening in real time. So that's a great illustration of how quickly Synchronized Security can identify an infected machine, to isolate it, to prevent cybercriminals from communicating with it further, to prevent data from being exfiltrated from the organization, and prevent the lateral movement of malware. It's also a really good illustration of the power of a security automation system. So everything happened here without administration intervention. Freeing up resources and removing the need from people to need to constantly monitor security consoles and solutions. So I hope you found that illustration useful. Thank you very much indeed for watching.